Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keeping It Real with America's Supermom. I'm excited to have a returning guest. Shooting star is what I call her. So we are here today celebrating a new year and just chatting like friends. I feel like I have known her forever, even though we actually connected for the first time on an interview live on YouTube. So, without further ado, I'm going to give her the opportunity to introduce herself before we get into some questions.
Yeah. It's so lovely to be back here. I totally agree. We connected right away, and we could have talked for like 3 days on that interview. So if anybody doesn't know me yet, first of all, check out our older interview. My name is Orion. I'm from Israel. I'm a mother of two boys. My older son is now in the army, and the younger one is homeschooling himself. And um, my business is about inventory, but we're going to talk about life, I'm guessing.
Yes. We may get into some business, but so let's not just brush over your son homeschooling himself. So talk to us about what that means. So many people are like, they take on this mindset as moms that they have to be right there doing everything when it comes to this remote learning or just independent learning that the kids are doing now. So I think that's very interesting and
Okay.
liberating for some moms. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So both my husband and I had negative experiences with school. I
Hmm.
was a really good student, so good that um, I didn't learn the most important thing at school. I never learned how to fail. And to this day, I'm struggling with figuring out what went wrong and how I'm going to fix it. Because I only have two options in my life right now. Either I'm the star student or I do nothing. So it's really easy for me to study. Put me in a classroom. I'll learn, I'll teach, I'll help, whatever you want. But it's only in that tiny little section of life that I can do that. Everything else, barring parenthood, where I just wouldn't let myself go, I get stuck. I'm gonna give you an example because it's with me exact this last week. A few years ago, I took everybody and we went climbing, wall climbing.
Mm-hmm.
I went up a foot, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and I was shaking and I couldn't move, and I wasn't afraid. It was just too hard, and I went
Mm-hmm.
down and I didn't climb the wall. And I'm thinking about it now, looking back at it, and it's like that's an analogy to life. I
Mm-hmm.
do, I really want to do all these amazing things, but I climb just a little bit, and it becomes too much. So, and I think a different kind of schooling could have taken me to a totally different space in life, and now I have to fix it on my own. It's kind of hard to fix yourself. My
Mm-hmm.
husband, on the other hand, if he were younger, he would probably be put on some kind of ADHD medications, smart as hell, but a firecracker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he loves learning. He's loved learning all his life. He
Mm-hmm.
hated school, yet brought him down. And then we
Mm-hmm.
had kids. And we had our firstborn was smart as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Then his younger brother was smarter than him.
Mm.
And we were looking at him as he was making his way to kindergarten and thinking we have to put him at school and how much we don't want to do that.
Mhm.
And we started investigating and and then I found out that a dear friend of mine that I respect very much homeschooled his children.
Mhm.
And I knew his younger boy, smart as the devil. And I
Mhm.
said, I want to understand what's going on there. And I started researching. And that's what happened to us as soon as we started thinking of becoming parents. We started researching stuff and we
Mhm.
stopped taking for granted this pattern, this path that has been handed down to us.
Mm-hmm.
Where, as a young couple, it was clear to us that we have to get married, we have to buy a house, I have to go to
Mm-hmm.
college, blah, blah, blah. You have this path set out for you. As soon as we became parents, as soon as I became pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
we started asking, but why? Simple, extremely strong question to ask in life is, okay, why?
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing, we're Jewish, so it was clear to us that we're going to have the circumcision. But we're not religious, so we're going to go to the doctor to do it, not have the entire ceremony. And then we looked at each other and said, well, if we're not doing this because of God and our religion, why are we doing it at all? Let's research this decision that we just automatically took. Same thing happened when we started thinking about school. Both my boys have their father's energy
Mm-hmm.
and mischievousness. So it was clear to us that as soon as school and child meet,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be go to the doctor, get some meds.
Mm.
And we were not pleased with that idea at all. They were both devilishly smart, still
Mm-hmm.
are.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started researching this entire idea of school, and being both very academically minded, we actually did some research.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out that school wasn't created um, from heaven, didn't come down from heaven with the rules of the good book.
Right.
It's
Right.
actually a very, very new phenomenon.
Mm.
And schools as we know them, the single age classes, teacher in front of the class, blackboard, all this
Mm-hmm.
shebang, the whole 9 yards. This is a structure that was developed to solve a problem. Now, the problem is long gone. The problem after was realized after Persia lost a war at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
where wars were no longer fought by highly trained knights, but
Mm-hmm.
rather by armies. And they lost the war, and they did some research, and they realized that their commanding line, the officers that came from the nobility and had private education, were doing pretty well, but they
Mm-hmm.
didn't have troops. A mass of simple people who can do simple tasks, automatons basically.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to be able to read simple instructions, do very simple math, and obey, 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 obey. That's what you need for an army. And they didn't have that, so they lost the war. And so they set up a school where they can create automatons, robots, basically. People who take directions very well, don't think for themselves too much,
Mm-hmm.
and are able to bore themselves to death 8 hours a day. So they can work in the factories and they can fight in the fields of the fight.
Wow.
And that's what schools know how to do. Just like your washing machine can't defrost your food
Right.
and your microwave won't wash your dishes, a school was developed, planned, structured to create people who do not think and obey.
So true.
Time moved on, our need from our future generations changed, but we didn't change the tool.
Mm.
And anybody who's willing to ask but why and do the research, I highly recommend the works of uh, whoa, I knew his name. I had his name in my head a second ago. Uh, John. Doesn't matter. I'll figure it out
Yeah.
later.
And just we can put it in the show notes.
He was a teacher in the U.S. private school fifth graders, and teachers come into classes as they study to become teachers, as they train to become teachers, they come into class to inspect, not inspect, but watch.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
training teachers watch teachers because they need to learn how to teach.
Mhm.
And John Holt, that's the name.
Okay. Okay.
He was a trained teacher. He had a classroom and he decided he wanted to improve. So he agreed with one of his teaching friends in school to come into each other's classroom and watch the children, not the teacher.
Mm.
And they soon realized that their children, and I repeat this because it's important, they were fifth graders in a private school.
Mhm.
So high economics background, high
Mhm.
socioeconomic background. The children did not know how to read and write very well. They were lacking in math compared to where the class should have been, and they were and what they realized was that the kids were in constant survival mode. You sit in class, adults come in and say stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense, and then they ask you questions. The classroom is one of the only places in the world where those who know ask those who don't know.
Right.
And they don't ask you what do you think or try to,
Mhm.
it's not Socratic. You actually have to know the answer.
Right.
So he realized the kids were in survival mode.
Mhm.
This entire thing did not make sense to them, and they didn't know what they were doing. But they needed to survive and get the grades and not get punished.
Right.
And uh, he started looking for ways to let the children really learn.
Mhm.
And what I have taken from him, and this is how I call it, I have a name for it in my
Okay.
family, that's how we call it, is this is their knowledge. So when a kid actually learns in the natural way,
Mhm.
they own the knowledge. And then I look at it, and as an adult, you meet little children as an uncle or an aunt.
Mhm.
And there's always this thing, they just learned how to count and do some basic additions with their little fingers.
Mhm.
And the little kid comes to me and he says, Auntie, 3 plus 4 is 7.
Mhm.
And then all the wise Alec aunties and uncles will say, okay, and how much is 4 plus 3?
Mhm.
And the child runs aside just to count his fingers. And the uncle says, no, 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 no. It's 7 again. How don't you know that? It's the replacement rule. And what
Mhm.
I realized is that have to let them do it on their own.
Mm.
And one day you're gonna ask them, so if 3 plus 4 is 7, how much is 4 plus 3? And they're gonna look at you like you're stupid. And then 7. And then you know it's theirs, and nobody ever
Mm.
can take that away from them. And when you have those basics understood in your DNA,
Mhm.
because you figured them out,
Mm. Very good.
when the teacher comes in and explains a more advanced concept, the basics are there and you can work with them. And
Mm.
I grew up in a family of mathematicians.
Mhm.
And the basic thing, and it's not that parents do not have a job there.
Mhm.
Our job as parents of little children is exposure.
Mhm.
As a very little thing. You're climbing up the stairs, you're going to count them.
Mhm.
You're in the checkout line, you're going to count and you're going to add out loud. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 oranges, and 1, 2, 3, 4 apples, 3 oranges and 4 apples, and then the child can count. And slowly, those basic tenets of
Mhm.
mathematics become their own. And I had that done to me as a child. It's
Mhm.
just games. So
Mhm.
when I got into class and the teacher said, if you take the numbers and you switch the places, you still have the same mathematical equation, I was like, of course. Simple
Mhm.
as pie. And I had no
Mhm.
problem progressing.
Mm.
But years later, during my MBA, I met a girl who studied her basic math in the US, and nobody helped her get through those basics.
Mhm.
And math was the most scary thing in her life. I saw her move into survival mode as soon as and I was helping her with her statistics lessons.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, so if we do the average, what do we get? Or if we want this, what do we need to calculate? And just throwing out words because this was Chinese for her.
Mhm.
So I know like 10 words in Spanish. And if somebody comes to me, I can just throw them out. Maybe one of them will fit.
Right.
So that's what you get when you try to tell children and people. You've already learned that.
Mhm.
You're supposed to know this. Let's move forward. Instead, just like, you don't teach children how to walk. You pick
Mhm.
them up and you play with them, and you try to convince them that they want to try and they want to walk, but and you don't go like, what? We tried walking 2 times yesterday. How come you're not walking today?
Mm.
You're patient with them. You like give them time and they pick it up. Same thing with talking.
Mm.
You play with them, you laugh at their way, they are doing funny things with the language, and then you tell them, no, you don't say it that way. This is the way you say it.
Mhm.
And you go with it.
Mhm.
And the same thing happens with math. If you just let them count their fingers the millionth time, one day they're going to come in and say, I don't need to count my fingers anymore. I know. And they
Mhm.
know. No one can take it away from them. And this kind of schooling is what we call unschooling.
Mhm.
It's not that you're not present; it's
Mhm.
that you're not going to dictate their schedule. It's
Mhm.
not today we have to do an hour of math and an hour of history and an hour of reading. It's
Mhm.
when the child turns to you and says, Mom, why is anything? You
Mhm.
talk about it for 5 or 10 minutes until their eyes glaze over and then you let them go. Or when something really interests you, you can bring it up.
Mhm.
And if they catch on, you talk about it for a while and
Mhm.
then they let go.
Love
So
that.
my older son did not go to first grade. Instead, he went with with my husband, his father, to work at
Mhm.
homeschooling.
Mhm.
And he would read. He taught himself how to read at 5 years of age.
Mhm.
And he was an avid reader. I mean, I had this kid at 5. We get back from the store. I bought him a book. I was expecting him to read at 8 or 9, like Percy
Mhm.
Jackson or something.
Mhm.
He comes to me, Mom, I'm bored. We're just 5 minutes in the door.
Mhm.
Mom, I'm bored. Well, I just bought you a book. I read it. What do you mean you read it? It's like, I read it. And that's it.
Mhm.
And so he would go with dad to the office. Luckily, the office was at my mother in law's. So he would
Mhm.
watch TV, he would walk outside where it was safe. He would take old papers and draw out. He was into genealogy at the time, so he would draw
Mm.
out these very complex family trees for the Grecian gods.
Mm.
And then at one point or another, he would pick up his head and ask his dad something, get 5 to 10 minutes of an explanation, and move on. They
Mm.
would drive around the country to meetings, and he would go with his dad, and everybody loved him. It was amazing.
Mhm.
But there was one little problem. He was very lonely.
Mm.
Adults aren't good enough um, environment
Companions. Yeah,
companions.
kind of like it. Yeah.
So at the end of that year, we found a democratic school, which was a compromise. It
Mhm.
wasn't as free-forming as we would have liked it.
Mhm.
It had kids in it of all ages. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't an easy move. And his brother was just going into kindergarten at that time, and we realized we just want to put them both at the same place. I never thought of putting his younger brother into homeschooling at such a young age. A handful of a kid. Love him to death, but he was a handful.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, my younger son grew up in a democratic school, which is a school where you have classes,
Mm-hmm.
you choose which classes to take, and
Mm-hmm.
you participate as a kid in the governance of the school from
Mm-hmm.
the first day.
Wow.
So when he was in kindergarten, they only governed the kindergarten. But for
Mm-hmm.
example, instead of having a cookie cutter birthday party, which is
Mm-hmm.
what you have to do as a kindergarten teacher when you have 40 kids,
Right.
they would bunch them up in fours or fives that had a birthday around the same time, and the kids would plan the birthday. So one time it was about Japan, another time it was about comics, and they had a different birthday every week.
Mm.
And the children were part of the expression, it wasn't dictated.
Mm.
As they grew up and went into the school, they started participating in the governance. So they had a court system, and nobody got a punishment or no resolution was made just by the adults. The kids
Mm.
participated.
Mm.
And it was a very open judicial system.
Mm-hmm.
If a child thought an adult wronged him or the school wronged him, they would go to the court system and bring it up. And it was discussed and handled.
Mm.
I During that time I had a very strong experience of driving by a regular school where I could see I was stuck in traffic exactly near the school, and I
Mm-hmm.
could see a couple of boys picking on a girl during recess.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bell rang and everybody went in. And I could see the teacher did not see the entire thing happening. They knew where to go.
Mm-hmm.
The girl went into the building, probably finishing her little cry because she was picked on, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody knew. And I was sure she wouldn't go and tell either. And I parked my car and I went into my kid's school, and a third grader, so this little nothing of a kid, comes up to me and says, "Hello, who are you?" I'm that mother of these kids. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's his school. The kids felt they that place belonged to them. It was a safe
Mm-hmm.
place that they owned. And so I knew they were protected. Yes, there was bickering, and yes, there was some bullying. But when I compared what I knew happens in the regular system with bullying to what they called bullying, it was like, well, that's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And still the school took care of it and didn't and expected it to be better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they learned with a lot of happiness. They Little kids, second, third grade, cla- taught classes throughout the year. So if somebody
Wow.
had a subject they liked and knew, they could teach a class.
That's
And they
awesome.
learned some really funny stuff. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just the regular school books.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of teachers were very creative. Instead of just teaching math, one of the teachers taught the girls how to sew. And through
Mm-hmm.
sewing, they did a lot of math work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the teachers, instead of just teaching Bible, so in Israel, you have to know the history of the Bible, the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He taught it as a D&D adventure.
Wow. That's creative.
So it was very creative. They did a lot of things on their own. When they had to go on a school trip, the children would plan it. The children took part in the hiring of teachers. Any teacher who wanted to work there had to get an interview by the children, and they would come in for a demonstration day and teach, and the children would then come in back in and say that's a good teacher, or we didn't really like that teacher. They couldn't fire teachers, but they came very close to the end of that process. If the kids in the hiring committee
Mm-hmm.
felt that a teacher wasn't up to par, they would bring it up, and they
Mm-hmm.
would be part of the process of trying to decide whether we can improve that and work with the teacher to improve or need to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
They voted on the budget. A lot of parents weren't happy with that, but this is
Mm-hmm.
their school, they're part of the governance.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing for me was the fact that they actually chose whether or not they go into classes. You commit, the rule was you commit at the beginning of the year, and then you have to stay in that class all the way through after you chose it. It wasn't like the Wild West, you do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it wasn't dictated completely.
That is just really good. I
And
mean, that's amazing.
and so when they finished in the middle of middle school,
Mm-hmm.
I talked with each of them when they reached that point in life and told them that it's time for them to make a decision about high school because I sent them to this kind of system wanting them to get two things. One of them I know they did, the other, uh, I wanted them to learn to choose for themselves, to make
Mm-hmm.
decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted them to learn how to handle failure.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my computer's acting up
Okay.
badly. Okay. And so when they were 14, 15, it was time for me to let go.
Mm-hmm.
I can no longer make the decisions based on your input. It's time to make that shift where you
Mm-hmm.
make the decision based on my input because you can't decide everything for a human being until he is 18 or 20 and then expect them to make good decisions. You've never
Right.
let them practice.
Yeah.
You don't go on the basketball court and start shooting threes.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you expect them to make good decisions if you've never let them practice?
Right.
So understanding that I have trained them and focused them on this trajectory that they will become self-sufficient adults that make their own decisions, it was time to start
Mm-hmm.
letting go. And
Mm-hmm.
letting go means that you let them have the decision. You can still create a limit, but
Right.
within those limits, you cannot decide the decision. You cannot
That
tell them, I'm going to let you decide whatever you want as long as you stay in school and take math and
right.
physics and apply to the college I chose for you. That's not
Exactly.
what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so my older son came back to us and he said, there are two options. I want to go to the military academy. It's a high school boarding school in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
If I get in, I will go to high school because that's required in that school.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't make it in, I'm going to not go to high school and do something else with my life, which he had a plan for, which I supported.
Mm-hmm.
He got in. So he went to high school and got a very good diploma at the end of it. I was like, I'm so disappointed with you. You never went below an A minus. What's that?
Wow.
How I don't I how did I bring you up like that? But
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot of fun seeing him grow through that process.
Mm-hmm.
He's very, very competitive, and at the beginning of the first year, he was second place in his class, in his group.
Wow.
And he was very frustrated with that until somebody pointed out to him that he was second best student simply by going to classes and looking at his notebook from time to time. And the guy who got first place studied 3 hours a day.
Mm.
And then he got his perspective and he came back and said, cost versus results, I'm good.
That's awesome. That's phenomenal. I mean,
And
I love that what you're saying because, This is as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing how, you have taken a stance to unlearn parenting, if you've considered that. Because there's so much that's in a mold about, what are people going to think? You kind of go through this dialogue in your head about, am I doing this the right way? What are people going to think because I'm doing something non traditional? But you have approached what you want to accomplish with them being able to think for themselves. And sometimes we just need like a little slight mind shift. So, even like you're talking earlier about how, being competitive and high achiever, but giving yourself the space to say that, um, I'm unlearning what I have been taught, because I come from the same background where it's like, we have been taught what success looks like in terms of academics. But now we can choose to look at making our own rules about what success is for
Yeah,
academics.
definitely.
So
Um,
the issue is but it's been ingrained in us for so long that
yeah.
it's that breaking away, you know.
So I'll tell you something I just learned like a week ago,
Mhm.
and it's been with me since, and it's not mine. Somebody taught me this, and it's the rule of goop, GOOP,
Mhm.
going on other people. So you're thinking, whenever I'm thinking, so what are they going to say about me? What are they going to think about me? As a goop, it's not relevant. Because most of the time, like 99% of the time, all those people that you're busy thinking, what are they thinking about you? They're busy, they are busy thinking, what are you thinking about them? So who
Right.
cares? You're
Okay.
the star of your own life, and they're all just stand-ins.
Mhm.
They're important people in their lives. I don't.
Mhm.
I am trying to be more and more cognizant of how much value I give those people and how
Right.
much I need to let it go. As a parent, I was really lucky that I never had that scene in the supermarket. I had others,
Mhm.
and my values as a parent were very, very clear to me. I knew what I was going to achieve, why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And so even when I got those looks, and I got those looks,
Mhm.
I was like, I don't care. And I really didn't care. I don't know why I can't move that to other places in my life, but as a mother, I knew exactly what I was doing,
Mhm.
why I was doing it, how it was working, how I was measuring myself. It's
Mhm.
not enough to know what you're doing.
Mm.
You have to measure yourself and get a feedback loop going.
Mhm.
Because I could say that I'm doing a really good thing, but I'm beating up my kids.
Mhm.
Corporal punishment is really good. I don't think so, by the way.
Mhm. Mhm.
But if you measure and you see the feedback isn't going in the right direction, then you can fix, even if you did something that was really bad to start with. Now we know corporal punishment doesn't work, and we know why it doesn't work.
Mhm.
So we know that the feedback isn't going to be there. You
Mhm.
When you hit a child, it's very arbitrary. They don't know what they did right, they don't know what they did wrong.
Mhm.
So you're just training them to do stuff, and you don't have any flexibility in their mind. So whenever they come up
Mhm.
to a new situation, they have no ability to handle it, and it's all on you. And that's your feedback. There
Mm.
isn't any growth here.
Mhm.
When you talk to them, when you explain to them why this situation was wrong, what you are expecting of them. And by the way, the human mind at all of us, specifically more so children, has a huge problem with negative. The
Mm.
negative space. Don't do X is something that the human mind really can't handle.
Mm.
First of all, we've just eliminated one option, and there is an infinitesimal amount of other options that can be done. So, which one do I choose? The other
Right.
thing is it's called don't think of carrots. If I
Mm-hmm.
tell you not to think of carrots,
Right.
you're going to think of carrots because our
Mm-hmm.
mind has a huge problem handling negation.
Mm.
And try this out with kids, your kids, other people, kids, very little kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we're automatically very negative, at least me with my Jewish
Mm-hmm.
upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
for my children, it was always, don't do that, do that.
Right.
Add the positive. If you can, try to avoid the negative altogether. It's not
Right.
about what you shouldn't do. It's about what you should do. When you look at a kid and they're scribbling all over grandma's floor, and you look at them and you say, you know something, kid? We only scribble on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a kid scribbling on paper right away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you then look at him and you say, you know, kid, after we scribble on the floor, we have to clean it. He'll go and clean it
Mm-hmm.
because you gave him a positive direction.
So true.
And so, after all this entire long story, when my younger son, who's now 16, um, was about to finish middle school, I
Mm-hmm.
told him it's your time to decide. And as much as I loved his school because
Mm-hmm.
of the friends there, he decided that he has gotten all that he wanted academically from school.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going on his own in his own direction. He wants to get a job, but with coronavirus and lockdowns and stuff, he's kind of stuck at home. So
Mm-hmm.
he's teaching himself programming for creating games in a class that's once a week with a teacher, and he likes that. He's also going on to Khan Academy
Mm.
to do some math work every day and some programming work sometimes. And he's now decided to start learning a actual skill. He's trying to learn how to do computer aided graph drawings for
Mm.
the construction business because he knows he can get a job there
That's awesome.
through family ties and that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
he does a ton of non-productive time a day.
Mm-hmm.
But so what? He
Right.
decides when to go to the gym, and he's going to the gym a couple of times a week.
Mm-hmm.
He's learning to play the guitar on his
Mm-hmm.
own. He's our chef conditor for desserts almost every
Mm-hmm.
week. He's been teaching himself, with help, of course,
Mm-hmm.
how to make deliciously scrumptious desserts.
Mm-hmm.
So he's learning how to own his own life.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, is most important. It's far more important than getting his GED in history.
Right.
And yes, sometimes either me or his father or him brings up a notion and we talk about it for 10, 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So last week we talked about taxes and bureaucracy
Mm-hmm.
and about uh, the famous poem that King David created for Jonathan and Saul after they died of the war.
Mm.
And that's unschooling for you. You can talk about the most incredible things
Mm-hmm.
in a given day.
I love that. And it's a conversation that's going somewhere in terms of the freedom to ask appropriate questions and start that journey of seeking it out. So let's just say, taxes, well, why do we have them? And how do they start? So you begin that journey yourself of researching something that you don't really know and having the mindset that you don't have to accept what somebody else said. You can do your own research and come up with your own reasoning as to why you would agree or disagree, or, and that type of thinking helps you to be more proactive if something needs to be changed, or even creating something new
Yeah.
from this old system or mindset that might or might not have been working.
Hmm.
So
Now,
I
the
love that.
the one thing I've been working on myself as far as parenting, and my husband's much better than that to the to our to my happiness because the kids need it, is
Hmm.
when a kid comes and asks you a question, try not to answer them, and try not to solve all their problems all the time. I'm really bad at it. I'm an engineer. I come from a Jewish Ashkenazi descent, so we're used to just fixing everything for everybody all the time.
Hmm.
But when a kid comes and asks you a question, little kids, always ask them what they think the answer is, because 90% of the time they don't ask the question you think they're asking. So you have no idea what they're saying.
Hmm.
Little kids have their own perception of the language you're talking. They use the same words in the same sentences and mean something else.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Hmm.
So it's really, really important to give them to send the question back to them to make sure you're talking about the same thing.
Mm.
Um, my younger son would come home and say, "Today I fell in love with girl's name."
Mhm.
And his grandma, my mother-in-law, would go like, "Oh, he was 4."
Mhm.
And we already knew his language. For him, falling in love meant hugging. And
Mm.
then he would say, "Today I had sex with girl's name," and that meant kissing. So unless you ask him back
Mhm.
what he means or what she means, you're never going to know what you're talking about.
Right.
And it's like, oops, sorry.
Mhm.
It's like talking with somebody who's talking a different language. It
Love
is.
that.
As they grow up, you have to keep this habit going because you want them to think and practice making inferences and being logical and trying to connect things. If you always give them the answers, they don't develop the skills. I'm
Mhm.
really bad at this.
I love that. I mean, because that is something that's true for adults, because, we just say, come and join this business, we're going to be successful. But, your idea of success and somebody else's is different. And we don't even leave room for another definition, not until we actually have a conversation. And a lot of times we're about forcing this mindset of the business onto people without even taking the time to have a dialogue about, is this something they want? Are they genuinely interested in this? But that comes from that conditioning with school to be like, okay, well, this is our business. This is how we do it. And you're going to come into the system of mindset that we have, instead of exploring, like, and I think it's sometimes true from thinking about what it is you want to focus on. If you're about duplicating and mass producing some things, that would supersede some of the questions you ask, rather than, okay, we are solution oriented. So we are more engaged in our clients. And so we're all about hearing their version so we can create something together. So I think knowing what your values are makes a difference, but that's a great thing to practice with children, and having that mindset from a young age all the way to adults, it makes a difference.
Oh, totally. I've had so many situations where I was in a heated discussion with somebody and we couldn't agree and we couldn't agree and we couldn't agree until we just realized we were both saying the same things using
Mhm.
a different point of view. We were actually in total agreement. We were both very heated about it. We just called it different names. So understanding what you're talking about, getting the baseline, the definitions right, first thing
Mhm.
is extremely helpful. And the other thing, as parents, as bosses, is the mindset of don't bring me problems to solve, bring me solutions to fix, to approve or not.
I love that.
Because
That's good.
and again I say I struggle with that immensely. When my kid comes and says, "Mom, I can't," I immediately do it for him, or
Mm,
immediately tell him what to do.
mhm,
And I'm trying to learn how to try. What did you try? Did you think about that direction and let it go?
mhm. Well,
And
and I think also, like, when that comes to be the case, if you've determined based on what they ask you what the problem is, then asking a question that can lead to that mindset for them.
mhm,
So if they say, if the problem is, they didn't establish a boundary or something, then just say, when was another time that you felt you've had this? Or, what would be a good outcome if X? Or, what about this can you control and what can you not? Just certain things that can
yeah,
get them on that frame of mind without you actually because I think we're here. Well, I know, I mean, I just feel in my heart we're here as guides for our children. And, there's this input that we have in them, part of our DNA, that they think like us and they, rationalize on a lot of things. So,
mhm,
we can be that person that can just guide them with the right questions that they might not have considered, because I think there's that inner knowing about things. We know what we should be doing. However, we just kind of lack the confidence. So in our head, we may have a solution, but the answers that come up are, you're not good enough for this, or how do you know what the answer is? So when we ask the question verbally to them, they think, wow, I would think that it would be this, and then to get that validation that what they were thinking is right might be all they need to
mhm.
have the confidence to take action, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally makes sense.
Mhm. And we
Uh,
need to do that with ourselves, okay?
yeah. Oh, totally. I I noticed that for some reason kids are inherently untrusting of their parents.
Mhm.
When they were very young, I would catch them in mischief, trying to hide stuff from me, trying to do things without me noticing.
Mhm.
And I would ask them always, "Why did you do that? Why didn't you ask for permission?" And they say, "Because you would have said no." And I'm
Mhm.
looking at like, why would I have said no to that? But
Mhm.
okay. So you knew I was going to say no, but you didn't. You didn't ask for permission. So you were trying to bluff me. You were trying to lie to me.
Mhm.
And you did something that you thought was wrong, that you
Mhm.
thought you shouldn't be doing.
Mhm.
So you were in double trouble.
Mhm.
First, for doing something that you thought was wrong, and second, for lying, which is much, much, much worse. And I
Mhm.
would tell them, listen, you know I'm going to say no.
Mhm.
So here you've got two choices. You can either ask me, and there's this little sliver of possibility that I'm gonna say yes, and you're out of trouble altogether. And by the
Mhm.
way, that little sliver was about 90%, because most
Mhm.
of the time they didn't want anything that was major. So
Right.
maybe I'll say yes with a little twist on it.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can do it in your room, or yeah, but no fire, or I don't know what.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or you can not ask me, and then it's 100% no, because I don't allow lies,
Right.
and lies get you in trouble.
Mhm.
And the funny thing happened is that they learned this lesson so well that they expanded it outside of the home. Not just mom. Every
Mhm.
time I want something and I'm sure it's no, I'll ask. Maybe it's
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
And then I realized that I don't do that. And I had to teach myself to do that as well. We were in a supermarket. I have no idea where in the world. I don't know what we needed, but we needed something.
Mhm.
And I was looking for it and I was frustrated. And my son suddenly turned around and started walking. And I said, "Well, where are you going?" Says, "I'm going to ask for permission for whatever it was." I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Why are you going to do that?" I said, "Maybe they'll say yes." And I was like, I just taught him that.
Yes.
Why didn't it even cross my mind?
So true.
I was certain that they were going to say no. And I
Mm-hmm.
have forced myself to
Mm-hmm.
continue asking, to come out and ask every time I'm sure the answer is no. I already know that I keep saying to them, you already have the no in your pocket.
Right.
And it's so easy to say, I know they're going to say no, so I'm not going to ask so that I don't have my emotions hurt.
Right.
So nobody said no to me because I didn't ask.
Right.
But then I missed out on the 50%, 30%, 90% of the yeses.
Right.
And
So true.
what we have to, what I have to do, and I think a lot of other people have to do, is let go of that hurt feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I know they're going to say there is a good potential that they're going to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be okay with that.
So true. I call
And
that letting go of the outcomes, you know.
yeah, and for me, I think the only way to do that is to actually go and get the nose straight on
Right.
and feel that feeling of being upset
Yeah.
and then say, feeling you're in the wrong place, leave, please. Nothing happened. The no was there before, the no is here now.
Yeah.
Nobody insulted me.
Exactly.
And if they did, well, goop. It's I'm not going by
Right.
other people's
So
thoughts
true.
and
And
words.
just, just detaching from the outcome.
Yeah.
That's an isolated incident that doesn't have to do with anything about you as a person or whatever, but we have all this emotional tie that we put to outcomes that really shouldn't be there. So I think you brought up a good point. This has just been, look, I could talk for hours. Okay. So I am like, just really impressed with your mindset about the way you approach and think about things, especially with parenting. And this is really something that many parents could benefit from because, you do have that voice in the back of your head, am I doing this right? And, lacking confidence and sometimes not having an example of a new way that you feel led to do something. So you lack the confidence. And so I think this is just great, the things that you're bringing up. So
I just want to
I
add one
can,
thing about
hmm
all of this is I'm not a parenting expert. I'm just a mom. And
right,
it's the message I want to put onto that is that all you moms, you can be amazing moms if you let go of that uh, going on other people's mess, eyes, ears, faces.
hmm
Focus on the results you want to get with your children.
hmm
Focus on being the best mother you can and take care of yourselves in the process. That's all. I can speak and I'm very affirmative. I'm speaking with exclamation marks,
right,
hesitation because I tried it and hey, I wasn't the best mom in the world. There was like a million other things that I wanted to do.
yeah,
And I look at friends of mine who go to these amazing excursions with their kids like once a week and they take them to the museums and the uh, stargazing and this and that and the other. And I always said, I'm not Mom's Productions Ltd. I have a life, my kids have a life, and I have two boys. Let's leave it at that.
hmm I love that.
And sure, I wanted to do more.
hmm
And then again, when I look at it, I did very well. And
hmm
I'm speaking with this authority not because I have credentials, and
hmm
I'm a sucker for credentials
hmm hmm
because I know this is just like the kids who learn how 4 plus 3 equals 3 plus 4. This is my knowledge. It's mine. I acquired it with my own 10 fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I tried it, I tested it, I researched it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm completely secure in it.
I love that. And
And
I mean,
it's your prerogative as a parent to do that.
I love that because, you bring up a great point that a lot of us feel like we can't speak on things unless we have the credentials, and, because we've been taught to validate things with credentials, with an education, with the schooling or whatever. And we really minimize the value of on the job training, that experience that, you can learn everything in a book, but if you're not applying it, just because you have credentials doesn't make you successful because you might not have tried anything. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that approach. And that's something that we should challenge ourselves and think about. You can follow somebody with credentials, but if you ask them, well, how did this work when you were raising your kids? Oh, well, I've never raised any, but I've schooled in this area, and these are the results based on somebody else's experience that I've observed. So you bring up a great point about that. So I think that's amazing. So
We
what
have to balance. We have to balance. I mean, you don't want,
Mhm.
we want doctors who went to school for being a doctor. We don't need them to do on the job training on themselves.
Mhm.
And
So true.
we want we want the balance. You don't want somebody who just finished reading all the books. You're not going to let them go into the operating room.
Right.
At the same time, you don't want somebody whose own all his background is hands-on. There is a place for academia.
Right.
In your own life, balance. I read a ton of parenting books because I wanted to be a good parent. Some
Mhm.
of them I couldn't fathom. I couldn't read. But I just leafed through them and checked. And even those most horrible ones, we used to
Mhm.
call, this is a book we got from my sister-in-law, and it's called Children the Challenge. And we used to call it Children the Enemy because it
Mhm.
was so horribly Germanic. And it was an old book, and some of those things just we couldn't jive with. We
Mhm.
hated it. And still, I took some nuggets out of there, some
Mhm.
ideas.
Mhm.
And
I
you
love it.
and I read a ton of books, and a lot of times I would not agree with the system, but I would try this trick and that little thing.
Mhm.
And it's your right as a parent, as a business person, as everything. Educate yourself and then find your own voice and practice.
Mhm. Love that. Well, great advice. So what is the best way, for the audience to get a hold of you? Because, we went into a totally different direction, which always happens. But I love the aspect about owning parenting, because we really, that is a challenge. We have all these different situations that go on that usually as moms we feel responsible for. If my kid does this, and then you feel responsible. And I love the fact that you are showing us through your experiences that children have choices. And as much as we want to be a good parent, we feel usually we can only be a good parent if we eliminate the mistakes from our kids' lives and without letting them experience
No.
them on their own. You see what I'm saying? So seeing you and hearing you talk like this helps us to let go a little easier about, hey, it's about the training, it's about the example that we're setting and the dialogue about them being involved in their own development. I mean, so many different lessons and nuggets. I'm hoping everybody was taking notes. But so, what's the best way for the audience to get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on Facebook and
Mhm.
on LinkedIn using my own name, Oriana Vidan.
Mm-hmm.
and YouTube and uh, or Gmail, orion.avedan@gmail.com.
Okay.
So,
And this has just been wonderful. So, what final words would you share with any parents out there, or whatever you feel led to tell them?
um, I think that the biggest thing that helped me, and when I look at what we just talked about, is that you are parenting an adult. You're currently in charge of a child, but your job is to parent an adult. And if you take this perspective, it's going to be so much easier. That's what directed us throughout the entire process. And let them try out in small examples. So I gave them, for example, pocket money from a very, very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't funny money. Like, I did not pay for chores. Chores are chores, and pocket money is pocket money. They're totally separate. And
Mm-hmm.
then, as a parent, I have to make sure you have what you need for school, you have your food, you have your clothes. And then, if I want to give you a gift or a little treat, that's my prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
You have your money. If you want to go down to the shop and buy yourself a sweet, or you want to save up and buy a book, or you want to go out with friends, that's your money. I can set the limits, and within those limits, everything's game. I do not have a say
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted them to practice using money.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the first time I worked as a teenager, my money disappeared within 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no money tools coming into my adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted them to make the mistakes with pennies and cents instead of dollars and full salaries.
I feel you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the final bit I'm going to tell you, and this is something that happens everywhere in life, is pay the fiddler first. Pay first. Be willing to pay up early on. The more we drag problems, the bigger the payment is going to be. And I'm, again, really good at saying this, not as good at doing this. I was good with the kids. You
Mm-hmm.
learn how to do it when you try to get through a full night of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to give in and let
Mm-hmm.
them have their little bottle with milk or juice, or come to sleep in your bed, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is they want.
Mm-hmm.
Pay if you are strict with yourself. It's not being strict with your kids. It means it's being strict with
Mm-hmm.
yourself. If you're strict with yourself at the beginning, you're gonna get the benefit of that for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Such multipliers. But if you're like, no, I'm tired, no, he's crying, and if you're not strict with yourself, if you let yourself off the hook, you're gonna pay and pay and pay and pay.
So true.
I wish I
Mm-hmm.
was my mother.
I know. I love that. Because it's the wisdom, but now, kind of get crafting that after you've seen your decisions, now you have that wisdom that you're speaking from. And I get that. I think the way to handle that though is to, really sit down and think, okay, I'm wise about this. Now, I think the decision making part is the easiest thing to some extent, because you can feel if something feels right. However, the confidence is not always there. So we can be confident in parenting and confident in, with our friends. But when it comes to certain areas where we've kind of created that image or that trepidation about it, that overcoming that story that we've told ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think it's good for us to say, you know what, that story doesn't work anymore. Or ask ourselves, am I telling myself a story around this? Is this something that I've experienced. What about this can I control or not control? Sometimes we just have to have a stopping point, like a gate, and say and ask those questions before
Mhm.
we just continue on with that mindset that's not serving us.
Totally.
So this has just been wonderful. I've got so many different things that I have gotten from it, that eye-opening experiences. So I just challenge everybody to think about, when it comes to parenting, recognize that, you have your own gifts, your own talents, and you don't have to follow somebody else's mode, even if it means going to school or having the mindset to get a college degree or whatever that may look like. You have the ability to create and make your own choices. And there's nothing wrong with that process. I think sometimes, coming from a high achievement background, we have this standard that we are used to getting the markers that immediately if we're doing something right. So when you're going in uncharted territory, you're not getting those markers,
Mhm.
or nobody is saying, hey, you're doing an awesome job. Some of these things that we've grown accustomed to. And with parenting, it's more of a marathon rather than a sprint. It's like, you're raising them for all these years, and it's when they're 16 that they say something nice sometimes, or you see that they were listening. So, you imagine you're going through this, and it's like 16 years before you get some validation. So I think we need to be mindful of that as parents, that, you know, people don't really have a space sometimes to validate us if they are on that journey also. Because, like you said, you're parenting adults. That's a big thing to realize. And that validation may not come until they get to be an adult in that area, or just with that mindset. So that could be years before that happens. So I
Yeah.
love the way you ended with that. That's phenomenal. Mhm.
Thank you.
So, if anybody would love to get a hold of Ariane, I tell you, just reach out to her. As you can see, she's so easy to talk to, and it's a safe space. It's a space to where, if you are actively wanting to do something different, to think a different way, have a conversation with a different perspective, I encourage you to reach out. And we definitely want to encourage you. If you have any questions, maybe you don't want to reach out to either one of us, but put them in the comments, and we definitely will get back to you, so that we can help you with parenting or just relationships, whatever it is that you may feel led that this conversation can spark with your own life. So we want to thank you guys so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you guys again on another episode. So again, happy new year, shooting star, and keep shining way over here in the US. I can see your light.
Thank you so much.
All right. So you have a great day, everybody, and thanks again. Bye for now.
Bye.